There is a claim by people from different African countries that they helped us South Africans during the colonial struggles. In my opinion, the above statement is not correct when it comes to the members of Umkhonto weSizwe, MK, the military wing of the ANC-led Congress movement, and those of the Pan-Africanist Congress freedom fighters. Of course, in the early 1960s onwards, people left the country for a number of reasons, which included a group called the Nightingales. Those were nurses and doctors who were mobilized by the ANC to support the newly liberated Tanganyika when the British health workers refused to treat black citizens of Tanganyika. Also, students, teachers, and other professionals left the country, including enemy intelligence operatives who were accommodated in different countries as refugees. The majority of students from South Africa went to further their education either through the ANC or the PAC, while some found their way through the United Nations and other institutions. The freedom fighters were a different category. Ours was to acquire military training, specializing on the aspects of guerrilla warfare. African countries that accommodated us on this, some for a short time and others for many years, included Ethiopia, Morocco, Algeria, Egypt, Tanzania, Zambia, and Angola. The main countries that served as the political base for the ANC were mainly Tanzania and Zambia. The MK members were treated differently. We had to remain in designated base areas. After our joint operation with the ZAPU cadres in 1967 and 68 in Rhodesia, the Western countries and South African colonial regimes pressured Tanzania and Zambia to close MK facilities in those two countries. As a result, we had to leave, and only the Soviet Union was willing to accommodate us. Hence, from late 1969, most of us went for further military training in the Soviet Union, and no African country of the then liberated one was willing to provide shelter for us. However, we always appreciate the political stance of the African countries, because they feared what the former colonial masters from the Western world were likely to do if their demands were totally ignored. Also, these countries, they contributed to the Liberation Committee of the Organization of African Unity as member states to Southern African liberation movements. In South Africa, the ANC struggle, as armed struggle, gained popularity, and most people found it easy to claim that irrespective of what they were doing, that they were fighting for freedom. This is the stance used even by those who fought in defense of the colonial system. Members of the underworld also, who, while introducing some ANC operatives and leaders into their secret routes to enable them to smuggle weapons into the country and also cars out of the country, demanded senior leadership positions, and as such claimed that they were fighting for freedom. In a word, it depends on the context of what those different countries and members are referring to when they claim that they supported the South Africans during the apartheid or colonial era. Be that as it may, many of the African countries distance themselves from supporting our armed struggle. And of course, at present, we have faced with the issue of being labeled as xenophobic in our treatment with mainly African and other people from outside South Africa who are not South African citizens. I believe that is very much unfair on South Africa because we are operating under the same framework where person who is not actually South African has to enter South Africa and enjoy being in South Africa, but through formal ways, in a way that is regulated and not illegally. It must be legal come in. And we also, when we go to other countries, if we don't have required documents by the government of that country, they lock us. Many of South Africans, as we speak now, are in prisons in Zimbabwe for being illegal, and that is a law that applies throughout Africa. However, the concept of Pan-Africanism is still something that is being worked on, and there is a need for a leadership and the communities in Africa to reach a situation where they have a clear framework of how to accommodate people of Africa in any other African country. It can't be one country that must accommodate every African country without documentation and the other needed actually things that are required to enter and stay in a country.
And do you think it's a good aspiration, Pan-Africanism?
Pan-Africanism is a wonderful aspiration because when it comes to our politics, it will regulate our wealth, how we should actually use as the African country a wealth and not be divided by from outside that we end up doing and saying about our wealth different things. We will have one word and more or less regulate our things like the OPEC. You see, if you see the Arab countries that produce oil, they all have one voice on how actually even the pricing of the oil. We need to have one voice pricing our gold, our diamonds, everything, minerals, as Africans, not just taken piecemeal.